The question I think every event organizer asks themselves when you are launching a brand new event is, if you build it, will they come? And luckily for us, they did. That doesn't mean there weren't some hiccups and some lessons learned. So we're going to talk a little bit about our partnership and how we are building better together. So we're going to kick things off, and you can scan the QR code, and what comes to mind when you think about trade associations and event organizers working together?
We expect some very provocative words here. Don't be shy.
You're hiding behind your screens. It's okay.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, and we'll talk a little bit about, one of the first decisions that we sort of made with this video for 2026 was, how do we do things a little bit different and bring up the energy and stuff? So after a partnership of years working together, we know that things evolve like any good partnership. So here we go.
I saw.
It's up on the screen over here.
Collaboration.
Conflict. Lots of C's. Culture clash.
Cost. Opportunity. There's some positives. Less revenue.
Disaster. Wow. Someone pulled that.
We're gonna. I think we're going to have to be on stage next year to tell us some of these.
Disaster.
Powerhouse.
Gosh, oil and water. Wow, you guys have a lot. This is gonna be a therapy session for every single person in this room. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit. This is our meet cute. So how do we get together? First of all, Questex connects buyers and sellers. We have over 5 million buyers in our database and our systems. We have community websites. We do media events. We are a global company, a lot of digital events. And the hospitality vertical, which I lead, is really connecting away from home or on-premise venues. This is hotels, bars, restaurants, casinos, cruise lines, airlines. And about 4 years ago, we saw an opportunity to create an event focused on hotel operations. Now, if you're in the industry, which everyone is, no one needs another hospitality event. There are so many. But we really saw what we believe was kind of a white space in creating one that focuses on hotel operations. Because we know the number one challenge for hotels is profitability. And we wanted an opportunity to bring all the hotels and that whole ecosystem together to solve that problem. So I actually pulled this exact slide from a deck that we presented to AHLA in 2022. It's sort of like a dating profile, right? So we wanted to say what values matter to us, right? We value collaboration and honesty and curiosity and growth. We're very purpose-driven. This was sort of how we pitched ourselves to AHLA. We talked about the fact that we are easy to work with, we love delivering results, and we provide world-class experiences. Next, one of the things when we would look at the benefits we bring from a partnership is how we can build for scale and acceleration. So when you think about creating an event, whether you go alone or do it with someone else, one of the biggest things that we were pitching to AHLA is the fact that, hey, this is our business. We know how to take an event and scale. We have trusted brands, we have expertise in the market, we have audience reach into our customers. We also have our center of excellence, which is sort of the hub of what makes all things happen. And shout out to Kristen, who's here, who runs our event excellence team. Marketing expertise, digital expertise, our skill sets, all of these things that we can do to execute and deliver is standardization. Those practices, those best practices means that we know how to build events and scale quickly.
So as a trade association, we are an advocacy-first organization, and we advocate for the business interests of hotels, brands, owners, operators, vendors, suppliers, partner states. We represent the whole industry, and we promote the industry to elected officials and in the media. And we also have experience uniting the industry through our own portfolio of events. We already have quite a huge calendar of our own signature events. However, what we realized is our sweet spot for events was somewhere around the 200 to 500 very niche-focused events. What we didn't have is the experience with a large trade show. We build best-in-class events, and our team has very curated thought leadership. And we wanted to be able to bring that thought leadership that we were very good at excelling at, and bringing that and combining it with what we knew was some white space in the hospitality industry. So when we were looking to our partner and to find a partner, we knew that Questex was going to be the best partner for us. They had trade show experience, clearly. They had deep ties in the hospitality industry. Our members were their customers already, and they had global ties. We have expanded, while we are the American Hotel and Lodging Association, we have expanded our footprint. We have committees that are international, and so we knew that that was an important pillar for us as well to expanding our relationship. And so with the partnership, we knew Questex was the one.
Oh, that's so sweet. So advantages for Questex. So when we looked at AHLA, we approached them because we said, listen, they are the trusted voice of the hotel and lodging industry. And as Kirsten said, we share a lot of the same customers. We were already doing hotel and hospitality events. We do stuff in the investment space. We really know from a global perspective, we have those relationships. But they also have those relationships at a different scale, but also in just a different way. We'll talk a little bit about that later. They also had engagement across the full hotel ecosystem, the advocacy and events. They had the desire to solve the industry's biggest challenges, right? So our customers were the same, but we were approaching them from different ways, right? Whether it was events or advocacy, but at the end of the day, we had that desire to help solve problems for our core customers. And I think that collaborative and unified vision was really what kind of brought us together at the end of the day, is that core customer or who that buyer is. And I think that's a really important piece of this whole thing. So we decided, let's do this.
So in 2022, we essentially got married, and 6 months later, we proposed, and then 6 months later, we had our first wedding. The show was launched, and it's no small feat. When you think about bringing two teams with very different approaches, and different strengths and different weaknesses, bringing them together in 6 months to launch an event, it was, again, no small feat. We were successful in reaching over 3,500 attendees in our first event, over 300 exhibitors, and won several awards in this inaugural event.
And by the second year, we actually grew our attendee by 26% and exhibitor by 43%, right? So we were definitely onto something. We saw the problem, created an event, found the right partner, and launched this event in 6 months, which is a huge accomplishment. So we are really excited about that. Let's talk a little bit about now the partner model, right? So we did this. Let's kind of look under the hood and see the things, and we're going to discuss a bit about what we think are the key tenets that makes a good partnership. So the first one is having that right idea that delivers the mutually beneficial result. So Kirsten and I talked about that, right? We saw the opportunity. We talked about what we thought would help deliver value to our customers.
We knew, and Brandy said this earlier, we knew that the hospitality industry already has a lot of key signature events out there, but they're mainly focused on the investors. And we knew that there was a white space for hotel operations, and we knew Questex had that alignment as well. So for us, that collaboration, and the idea that we wanted to both deliver results to this untapped operations side of the hotel industry, that was key.
And then collaborative strengths and weaknesses. So we keep using this analogy of marriages, right, or dating, but it's true, right? You need to know, like, do you leave your socks on the floor? Do you like to unload the dishwasher? Like, are you a good cook? Like, what are all of these things? And anytime we talk to partners, and we have a lot of partnerships, we are really brutally honest about, listen, we need to just put it on the table. What do we do well? What do we do not so well? And what do you do well and not so well? And you have to be really transparent about that. I think a lot of people, when they go into partnerships, particularly business partnerships, you tend to want to peacock a little bit about, like, oh, we can do this, it's all great, it's all the glossy stuff. But we all know in running events behind the scenes, it's chaos, right? There's a lot of things that can go sideways. And unless you're really upfront in the beginning around the ways of working, the culture, all of these strengths and weaknesses, it becomes really hard to have a strong foundation from which to build a successful partnership.
And we knew we had a strong events team. I mentioned that before. We have an extensive portfolio, but there was a lot of things that we didn't have experience in, and we knew that the Questex was going to be able to bring that to us for this kind of all-inclusive and all-encompassing event.
So the clearly defined roles and responsibilities. So when I started Questex actually last year, because all this happened before my time, so when I looked, there was a huge chart, and it was every single item that needed to be done to execute the event, with who was responsible between kind of who led it between AHLA and Questex and who was responsible. It was a timeline. So we had a whole detailed plan of roles and responsibilities that sort of helped us launch the event and the 2 years of success.
And we used the documents of the roles and the responsibilities and the accountability timelines for regular touch points. I mean, we had the teams on calls weekly, especially in the first 6 months when we had such a tight timeline. So we had a pretty lock-solid communication structure in place where we were continually going through all the action items that needed to be done for the event and the content and trade show.
And we were bringing 2 teams together, right? So it was constant communications, decision protocols, making sure, again, with doing an event of this scale and size, to make sure that everyone was communicating, lots and lots of meetings, because we all love meetings. So putting all that together, sharing information, problem solving, and then really establishing trust, right? These are all the kind of core tenets when you walk into a partnership that I think we would say make a good partnership.
Mm-hmm. But let's be honest, doesn't mean things don't always go as planned. So actually, Brandy, do you want to tell, so as Brandy mentioned, she came in last year, and so you can start by hearing maybe what you heard about what it was like to work with AHLA.
This is a brutally transparent.
It's okay.
So I joined and had a full team of people and a big portfolio, and I was learning all the events, and everyone would go through our different bar and restaurant show and the Vibe conference and go that, and then they say, the hospitality show. It's the AHLA one. And I was like, what? They're like, they can be really hard to work with. And I was like, really? Like, yeah, it's just, you'll see. You'll see, it's just really challenging. And every single one of the people on my team, a lot of them aren't actually here anymore, but a lot of people on the team had just a lot of negativity, right? And so the first thing I'm thinking as a new leader is, gosh, well, that's not a great thing walking into a team in a really big event that's had all this success when everybody is sort of at a place where going into this year, there's a lot of already preconceived notions around someone being difficult to work with or being challenged, and that's not a good foundation for continued success.
We also, going into this year, or actually going into last year, we would get on phone calls and the roles and responsibilities that Brandy mentioned and the spreadsheet where everyone was assigned and the timelines, every single person named on that spreadsheet was on these weekly calls. There were, no joke, 50 plus people on one call going through 6 to 7 pages of action items. It was painful. We're talking about like going from
should the lanyard be blue or pink?
And what is on Mark McGrath's rider that he has to have in the backstage, and apparently tuna fish. Like, I don't know, but this is what's getting like talked about in these calls that are going nowhere. So
everybody was involved in everything. And I would say that is one of those pitfalls, right? When you think about putting together a list of accountability and being really transparent on decisions, and yes, all these decisions have to get made, but it was almost like trying to be too inclusive of saying, well, let's just throw everything on the table and let's debate the color of the lanyards and let's talk about every single detail with every single person across sales and marketing and operations and conference and all of it. So everyone was involved in everything. And guess what happens when you have all of these decisions? Nobody really knows, well, then who's accountable for deciding who gets the tuna fish for Mark McGrath? Like, it just became so much information that everyone became a little paralyzed in accountability and decision making. And so then what ended up happening, of course, was finger pointing. Well, we talked about it on the call. So if we talked about it, then it went into the ether of like, well, then somebody's going to make the decision, right? And then the bigger decisions and stuff that probably wasn't a bigger decision. So our managers are very senior, and they were getting questions on, hey, can you approve, just silly things.
The tabletop
font.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just because nobody was taking accountability, it was whoever had the question of the day would just march up to the top and get their decision made, and clearly something needed to change.
And this is where I think losing strategy. So there's like a couple pieces, right? So the really most important part of all of this is that when you start getting in the weeds, which happens when you're in events, because there's so many decisions that need to get made, and you think you're being a good partner by having everybody involved in everything. And then you start to lose sight of what the strategy. So why did we do this in the first place? Who is our customer? And I think this happens with every event. You start to confuse maybe the exhibitor needs, which are important, with who the buyer needs are. And you start doing content for the wrong person, and suddenly the messages become really muddled. And I think, again, as I was learning in the less than a year I've been here, but hearing all of this stuff and seeing some of this stuff, I was sort of like, this should be an easy problem to fix. And so Kirsten and I were put in charge of this event last year, and we just met each other
We met each other at the hospitality show last year.
And I'd been in the company for a couple of months.
And we were told, okay, enter
You
Kirsten,
guys
meet
get
Randy,
along.
you two are gonna fix this next year.
Fix it.
Here we go.
Fix it. So what's the first thing we did?
We created a very disciplined ways of working and structure. And the idea was that there is one person in each of the specialized categories on each side of the team. So there's one person on marketing and one from Questex and one person from marketing on AHLA's side. Now they may have teams underneath them, but they are the ones that are the lead. They are empowered to make decisions together with their counterpart on the other side, and where they butt heads or where they can't necessarily come to an agreement, then that's when it gets escalated to the two of us. And then we will start the problem solving ourselves or work through it.
Yeah, and you can't be afraid to make decisions. I mean, a big part of this is taking the step back, and we spend a lot of time going back to the strategy. And I think with any event, the way I look at it is like, if you set the strategy and understand who the customer is, what you're trying to accomplish, look at all the data and all the information, because things change year over year. We have market conditions, attendee needs are different. So we really went back to setting what is the strategy. And it was funny because I think a lot of, when you try to slow the pace, when everyone thinks that they're just like, let's go ahead and do the event again and just keep, and you're like, we have to hold on for a second and look at the things that aren't working. And part of it is, well, the team dynamic isn't working, so we need to fix that. But we also need to assess and look at the show and how we continue to evolve and grow. Because this show is a fantastic show that has the ability to be a $20 million show. And we have to figure out how do we make sure that foundationally we have the right ways of working, but also the right strategy. And so we spent a lot of time, and we had a meeting in person actually at AHLA's offices here in DC, and we thought it would be really important because we actually have all pretty much new teams. So my whole team is relatively new across all of these roles, and hadn't really worked with Kirsten's team before. So we made the decision to put everyone together in one room for a full day, for a big power meeting, with the intent of setting strategy, talking through strategy, having discussions around things that were working, that wasn't working, but we set very clear goals of each of you are now going to break out and be accountable for coming up with your part of that strategy. So this isn't a dictatorship in a way where we were setting it and saying don't be part of the process, but we really want to empower the teams to work through those challenges together and then report sort of back up. And that is a big part of it, is if you set the right strategy, then everybody should be very clear that you're veering off track, and they have to hold each other accountable. And I think that's the big piece of it, is really encouraging everyone to say, listen, if you have a problem, talk about it. Don't just come back to me and complain and say, oh, someone from AHLA is like not doing this. It's like, no, you guys figure that out, because you need to. That's an important part of that working relationship. And then if you do run into something where it's like, hey, we can't have an agreement, we've had a few instances of those things, then usually it comes up through our teams, and then we sit down and we talk every week, and we'll say, hey, what about this? What do you think? And we solve the problem and we move on. And I think where things can fester and where relationships can go sideways in these partnerships, if things fester for too long. And that's what we inherited. We inherited, I think, a year of a lot of finger pointing and people sort of saying, well, this decision didn't get made, or this fell through the cracks, and it's because they didn't do right, and because there wasn't that accountability and there wasn't that strategy.
So we've seen the teams, again, as Brandy said, we keep talking about this empowerment. I think that has been just so critical to the teams feeling like they have accountability and they have a say in what they're working on and some of the decisions that are made. And Brandy and I, so the teams are, I wouldn't say required, they're encouraged to have their own weekly meetings. And then they are to report up, and then Brandy and I have our own weekly meetings, and then we bring the group back together. We try to bring them in person, and then, look, there's nothing better than meeting in person. That's why we're here right now. You get so much more out of being in a room together, and then also breaking bread. We had dinner together, we had lunch together. These are the small things, but when you're partnering and you're constantly just talking to someone on the phone for a whole year leading up to the next event and you never meet in person, it's just not the same connectivity. And we all obviously understand the importance of being in person and meeting together. So
yeah, and then we set new team meetings, and we're not involving everybody. And I was telling you the story the other day, actually. We had someone on my team who's involved on the editorial side who said, when am I going to start joining the hospitality show meetings? And I was like, well, why do you want to be on the meetings? And she's like, well, I was always on the meetings last year. And I was like, but why? Well, because I would hear about the content. And I said, well, so go talk to my conference director if you want to know about the content, right? So we're learning along the way that there's that, again, that expectation. We've had that from our sales team. We had the entire sales team between our two. The entire sales team would be going on operational calls to look at the cadence. I mean, again, we look at this and we're like, this is ridiculous. No wonder nothing ever, like things were stalling and didn't get done, right? But now, I mean, I have people saying, well, why am I not in the meeting? It's like, no, you're not being left out. You have a lot of, like, everyone needs to focus on that functional area and be accountable for that functional area. And then you have that opportunity to sort of manage up, right? And these teams, so the leaders, the directors and VPs on these teams that work for us also have teams of people that manage up to them. And so we're kind of creating that hierarchy, which then again makes accountability and decision making a much clearer, I think, process, which so far has been working really well. And then we also established a new timeline. So there was some stuff, and again, this is part of how our organizations are different. We operate really differently, and I think we can probably talk about that a bit. But we had the things that you guys are thinking about, because they're important, are things that we're like, hey, we usually do that 3 months before the event. So, and instead of it being like, oh my gosh, they're asking for us for something, it's like, well, no, they need to understand the context of how we as an event organizer map everything out, and when it's the right time to book a hotel room or order catering. Like, we do it in an order because we know the timelines of which things need to get done, and that's sort of how we manage our events. That's that standardization and that workflow process that we know works and why they chose us as a partner. And all it takes is the ability to say, hey guys, here's the context, here's the visibility and the transparency of when these decisions get made, so that everyone has a level, I think, of trust, right? And that's the big piece of it, because I started seeing some of that, and I'm like, I don't want trust to erode, because we're just like, yeah, we'll get to that. But it's like, no, let's actually show you when we're going to get to that and answer your question.
Yeah, it's been super helpful just to have that transparency and have these timelines and set expectations. I think you're talking about, I think for us, we care about our members so much, and we want to make sure that they are shown in the best light. And so we have our marketing team that wants to look at every single marketing piece that Questex is producing and wants to dissect it with a fine-tooth comb. And I had to say, time out. If our member is misrepresented, or if there's a title wrong, that is your role. But you can't take a microscope to every single piece of material that comes out. That's going to be inefficient. We have to trust each other. You have to trust their team, and then our job is to make sure that our members are shed in the best light and that it's accurate. So it's about setting that expectation and making sure that they understand their lanes, and that we don't report to each other, we work together, and that's been critical.
And another piece too, actually, that Kirsten brought up, I think early on, was we have a joint marketing teams, we have joint sales teams. So we have teams that are out selling different customers, and we have accounts that belong to AHLA, and we have accounts that belong to us. The sales teams have worked really well on collaborating, right, around key sponsorships. And some of those accounts that AHLA might be the lead on are actually our customers for other shows that we do. So you can see like it starts to get really complicated. And our 2 sales leads have done a really good job of being very collaborative and understanding that relationship ownership. And when you talk to a salesperson who's commissioned about how to split up accounts, let me tell you, it becomes really like a challenging conversation. We've had to work through that with them to say, listen, we're doing this based on where the relationship sits, but obviously collaboratively, we want the show to work, and it's all one big pot of money when we look at our revenue and the responsibility of revenue and growth. And one of the things Kirsten brought up to me early on was, that again, we didn't do a good job of explaining was because we handle everything operationally, right, with the show. And AHLE's team might sell into a customer, and it goes into Salesforce, and then, right, often Salesforce. And then 2 months before a show, that customer who was sold in to Kirsten's team would say, hey, I have a question about GES fees. And they would be like, okay, and then weren't sure who to go to, right? So one of the things, and that's an easy problem to fix, right? We have an entire team of people who are responsible for exhibitor relations and sponsorship fulfillment, and we knew that process, but no one apparently in the relationship we had for 3 years had bothered to tell AHLA, like, hey, here's visibility of who does what, when it happens in that timeline, and then also so you can better serve your customers, here's the information that you have so you can point them to the right person on our team to help them with exhibitor move-in or GS or any of those things. And these are such easy things when you think about it, right? But the fact that they hadn't really been happening when we sort of got involved was one of those things where like, no wonder there was such frustration, because that was not really happening in a way where we were just like, let's just share information and set guidelines and make sure that everyone's transparent and give ourselves context, right? Like if I'm in their shoes and I have a customer coming, well, of course I want to make sure that customer can get the right answer.
Yeah. So I know we're coming up on time, so I wanted to make sure we get to our
Oh yes, our last. Here's our 3 lessons that we learned.
I think we mentioned earlier, being disciplined is really important. That ways of working, that chart, that was really critical for us to make sure that everyone understood what their role was and what they were accountable for. And as Brandy said, sometimes saying no and being disciplined to say, no, you're not invited to that call. And that's sometimes tricky on your team.
And then that strategy piece, I will say this time and time again, I mean, strategy is a very overused word, but sometimes you just lose sight of it, particularly when you have an event that you've been doing year over year and it's rinse and repeat. And that's when things start to go, when you have teams and change, that people just assume. An assumption is a really bad thing, right? When we know that things are changing. So setting that strategy early is really important, because then it's that guiding document or that principle that every single team knows that they're empowered to execute against, right? So if someone starts veering off in the wrong direction, the whole teams are empowered to say, well, that's not the strategy that we set. We're not doing that. And here's why. And it becomes that guiding document. I think that's really important. We don't want to be in the weeds doing everything. And so sometimes when little things come up, I will even say, you figure it out. Like everything cannot be a problem. Like this is where we have senior leadership that needs to fix these problems too.
And that goes to voicing the challenges, making sure that the teams are connecting, they're talking, they are telling us where they're hitting bumps in the road, but we're knocking it out right away. We don't let it fester. Brandy and I connect regularly, and if we're having a challenge, we'll say, I'm like, Brandy, look, I'm having this issue, or this team is facing this. How can we work together? So it sounds so simple, but it doesn't always happen. So
yeah, you can't be afraid to, I think, voice what those things are in a relationship like this, and know that organizations are different, right? We move at different paces, we have different priorities in some ways, but the show together is our priority, and so again, it's our baby.
So who's coming to Miami? We have one final question for you. Miami in November is when we will have our 4th show together.
So whoever said, what did you say, like disastrous?
Disaster. Do you feel differently? Did we make you feel a little bit more comfortable about?
Yes, based on the word that you put in there. Let's see if we have because there was some I would say
there was some
it was like half and half, yeah. Right? Which is normal, right? Because it's easier to go do things on your own, but hopefully we've shown how it can be done the right way and the success that can come from that, and the things that are really important when you are in a relationship like this to make it work. So.
No. Oh gosh.
Wow.
All right. Well, I guess talk afterwards. So we didn't solve your problems. Okay. Well,
I think it's a problem that it cannot be solved in a half an hour. Thank you very much.